On this episode of Technicolor Blood, animated movies become live-action movies. Live-action movies become animated movies.
And Bohemian Rhapsody, not dead yet.
Right now on Technicolor Blood. Technicolor Blood. Hello, people. We are back to doing our little movie show here. We're glad you're back. Terrence, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Looking forward to talking about some movies and hearing what you watched since the last time we spoke.
Yes, because you have nothing to bring to the table. Am I right?
I was totally useless.
Typical. Okay. I watched a little movie we spoke of a couple of weeks back called The Outlaw King on Netflix. This was a Chris Pine-led movie, and it was something.
Yeah.
Chris Pine did, in fact, have a bit of a Scottish accent.
Just a bit of one?
Just a bit of one. It's like they made the conscious decision to say, let's not really go the full Scotsman here. Let's have you sort of tread lightly on this. It's
Don't
like
go full Scot.
Yeah, it's like they kind of knew what might happen. And I like Chris Pine. I think we both like Chris Pine, but
Yeah,
I was definitely skeptical about the idea of him pulling off an accent. I'm not really sure why. Competent actors pull them off all the time, but you know how American actors are with foreign accents.
Yeah, they've gotten a lot better at it. But
they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be comically bad with, like, say, Tom Cruise.
Yeah, and I think everyone might remember Kevin Costner doing an English accent for Robin Hood.
Oh, God.
That might be the high water mark of bad accents.
I had actually forgotten about that. Ugh. So, yeah, The Outlaw King was about Robert the Bruce. You might be more familiar if you think back to Braveheart, because everyone's seen Braveheart. Robert the Bruce was one of the characters that betrayed William Wallace on the battlefield. So this follows Robert the Bruce, Chris Pine's character. And William Wallace does show up in the movie in pieces, scattered around the kingdom as a warning, which actually was mentioned in Braveheart. So sort of a cameo if you consider Body Parts a cameo. Anyway.
But now this is not like a direct sequel to Braveheart.
Oh,
right?
no, not at all.
It's its own thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, It's totally its own thing. It wasn't great. It's I would probably put it in the barely worth mentioning category, but since we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, I thought I'd bring it up. If you like historical epics and you like big blood-filled, violent conflicts, then it's right up your alley. I will say that it's clear on some of the big battle scenes that everyone right now in Hollywood is chasing the Battle of the Bastards from Netflix, or I'm sorry, from HBO. That battle scene, you know, over the years, there are certain battle scenes and different conflicts.
From Game of Thrones.
Right. There are certain battle scenes and conflicts in movies that sort of raise the bar, Saving Private Ryan, certainly some episodes of Game of Thrones, a few others that I know I'm completely leaving out. But you could see in the battles here that they were basically trying to do what Game of Thrones did with that Battle of the Bastards. Didn't quite get there, but a well thought out attempt, I would say. But the movie wasn't great. It's not going to be mentioned a whole lot. I've barely seen any buzz about it on Netflix, and I guess that's really all I have to say about it.
So in the commercials for it, the thing that struck me was that it just didn't seem like it had a big enough budget to tell the story they were trying to tell me. And you're saying that they went for a huge epic battle at the end?
Yeah, they
was it noticeable that there wasn't money, or did they save all the money for the battle?
They definitely pumped a lot of money into the battle scene, but into the big main battle scene, but they tried to do so much, actually kind of exactly like Game of Thrones did with the Battle of the Bastards scene, where it's probably not in the forefront of your mind, but they did some sort of new type of things with the way the horses were running into battle and running out of battle, and the angles they were taking and the way that they sort of shot that. Because in the Game of Thrones battle scene, you know, Jon Snow is standing there and it's just complete chaos, and there are horses like running right by him in every direction, colliding, and they literally did that same kind of thing in this. So it was very clear that they were sort of using that as a blueprint. I didn't look into this, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out that maybe some of the same consultants or whatever you know, may have had a hand in that.
Sure, that makes sense.
But, you know, like I said, if you like historical epics and that sort of thing, if you're a big Braveheart fan, it's probably worth checking out. But otherwise, not the greatest thing.
Yeah, I seem to recall, just as a footnote to the movie Braveheart, that was the first film I remember seeing the historically accurate act of people in a battle just attacking the horse out from under the rider.
Right.
I think maybe because of the romance of the Western here in America, when we make films with people on horses, the horses are sort of sacred and protected. And Braveheart was the first one where I remember them just, kill the horse to get to the man.
Yes.
So it sounds like this is maybe like the next step in that sort of an evolution.
There was definitely horse trauma in this.
Yeah. Well, all right. So trigger warning.
But there were no stuffed horses being thrown off a cliff as there were in Braveheart.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking.
Yes. All right, we're going to come back and talk about some movie news. All right, some movie news. So, Marvel is continuing to rid Netflix of its TV series. And, of course, your first thought here when you find out that Daredevil has been canceled after 3 seasons is that, well, Disney Plus is on the horizon. Now, I don't know how all the contractual information works and all that. I mean, obviously, they have a deal with Netflix. Beyond that, I don't know that they can just cancel the show and then bring it back as it was on Disney Plus. But since I have no idea how they, I don't think Netflix doesn't release like their number of watches. Like, there's really no way for the public to know.
Normally, they do not. They did, however, release numbers for the 2 previous cancellations, Luke Cage and Iron Fist, and those were directly a result of low viewership.
Yeah, and that's no surprise. Daredevil being canceled was a little bit of a surprise because it's the only of the Marvel Netflix shows that I ever hear anyone talking about.
That's true, but I would still assume that if the other 2 had surprisingly low viewership numbers, maybe Daredevil did as well.
Potentially. And I'll say this, it took me a while to get into the first season of Daredevil. I ended up kind of liking it. I enjoyed the second season a little bit more, I think because of the Punisher element. And it's schlocky, actiony fun. I'm not saying it's amazing, historically great filmmaking or anything, but it has its high points. The recent 3rd season was released, I don't know, a couple of months back, and not just because I am an adult with a job that works all week, but I literally fell asleep during the premiere of the 3rd season, and then finished the episode at some point, and then took a week off, and then we tried to watch the 2nd episode, and I couldn't get beyond 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Like it was boring me to tears. And my biggest complaint with Daredevil is that the lead actor, I think his name's Charlie Cox, I just have never really truly been on board with that guy. Mm-hmm. And in season 3, they gave him a lot of, or well, I should say in the episode plus 15 minutes that I've seen of season 3, they gave him a lot of isolated emo stuff to chew on. And number 1, sad mopey superheroes can't do it.
Yeah.
And number 2, that guy sort of by himself, not playing off of other actors, can't do it.
Oh.
So I pulled the ripcord. I've been told that it gets a lot better towards the end, but I don't know if I want to put in the 6 or 7 episodes of quote unquote work to get to that point. So I could certainly envision a scenario where they bring this back in some form on Disney Plus.
Yeah, so about a day after Netflix had their press release regarding this, Marvel had a press release, and it was pretty coy the way it was phrased, but it definitely suggested that maybe the other characters from Netflix, they don't really have plans for, but they definitely have plans for something to continue with Daredevil.
Yeah.
Now, whether that means the show continues on Disney Plus, like you're suggesting, or whether that means they're going to incorporate that character into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, can't really say for sure.
Yeah.
Financially, it would make sense to bring him into the movies because he's a well-known character, and they're starting to play on that B and C level superhero now. So being able to bring back another A-list hero would make a lot of sense. But maybe Disney Plus is a smarter move because you can keep the cast. There's no way they're going to bring a TV cast into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Sure. And not that one. I'm sorry. Sorry, Daredevil, but no.
Yeah, another thing that should be addressed to anybody listening to this, because it happens all the time. People who have this notion that the actors who played the characters they like on television should make the jump to films, that will never happen. That's just not how the industry works.
Yeah.
You were never going to see the guy who played Superboy in Smallville ever play Superman in a movie. You're never going to see the guy who plays Daredevil on TV play Daredevil in the movies. That's just not how it works.
Yeah.
You just get that out of your mind. Just let that go now. We don't need to keep rehashing this year after year after year.
Yeah, and I don't want to crap all over Daredevil because, like I said, I did enjoy the first couple of seasons, but if they were to bring the show back in television show format on Disney Plus, I wouldn't be at all upset if they just completely started from the beginning and recast it. I'm sure they won't do that because there's some, I'm sure, built-in viewership there, but I wouldn't be upset by it. I find that character interesting enough that they could pull that off. But yeah, the other ones, Iron Fist, gone. I never watched it. Luke Cage, I got a couple of episodes in, couldn't finish it. Not that it was terrible, it just didn't hold my attention, and hell, I've got a lot of other stuff I watch. There's also that one called The Defenders.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was ever planned to be more than a season, but I don't believe there's any plans to bring that one back. The only shows that are left on Netflix now for Marvel are Jessica Jones, and as far as I know, The Punisher is going to come back for a second season. I actually prefer Jessica Jones to all the other Netflix Marvel shows. It's not as actiony, and I guess it's not as sort of bombastic and supposed to be as fun as the others, but I think the writing is just better. So I enjoy that one more than the rest. But the Punisher, the Punisher is one of my favorite characters in comics, but man, that was a rough season, that first one. I tried.
I got to think with the cancellation of Daredevil, which is the flagship show of the Netflix Marvel series, that's got to just tell you everything you need to know. The next two will, their next seasons will be their last seasons.
Yeah, that's got to be the overall plan. So, all right. So another piece of news here. You may have noticed that the internet flipped out a little bit about a Lion King remake by Disney. This one's going to be directed by Jon Favreau, who has made an interesting career for himself after just being the guy from Swingers or whatever.
Yeah. He's
suddenly he directed what I think is still the best Marvel movie in Iron Man, and he's doing all the stuff with Star Wars. He's heading up the Mandalorian series. Is that right?
He's the showrunner on the Mandalorian. He like you said, he directed the live action Lion King that'll be coming out soon. He previously had directed the live action Jungle Book. For them as well. Yep. I mean, he's definitely one of the tent poles for Disney's creative team.
Yeah, the teaser, it's just a teaser that hit the internet. It doesn't show a whole lot. It's basically and of course we use the term live action very loosely. It's just differently animated. Let's call it differently animated.
It's all CG, of course.
Yes. It's animated to look like actual animals.
Yes.
And it's basically the end of the teaser recreates the famous shot from the original Lion King where the baboon, you're the monkey expert, the baboon holds up the cub over the cliff, and it's literally the same thing except with
so several of the shots in the teaser trailer are shot for shot from the original animated film.
James Earl Jones is back.
Donald Glover, I think, is the lead.
I can't. I'm just going to embarrass myself if I try to pronounce the name of the guy from Black Panther that is in the movie. So I'm just going to sidestep that.
Oh, no, we want to hear you try.
I don't think so. Yeah. Billy Eichner somehow ended up in this movie.
Yeah, that's a curious one.
So
John Oliver
stumbled into this.
Yeah, a lot of big and interesting names as the voices of them.
Yeah, so I'm sure that will be a massive hit. It comes out in the summer of 2019.
So what do you think of this decision by Disney to just take all of their previous classic animated films and one by one make these live action ones? It seems to be working for them. They seem to be fairly successful.
Yeah, I try not to be the guy who's just like, oh, that's a sacred property, don't do that. Yeah. But I mean, every business is about making money. Disney is very forward thinking. They do not rest on their laurels at all.
No.
And I mean, they're dominating like no studio has ever dominated right now. And yet they continue to pump out more and more and more content. And with the express idea of taking this thing that worked on a previous generation and clutching it around this next generation coming up to get them, indoctrinated into the Disney ways as well. So, I mean, I don't love it because, as we've talked about so many times on the show before, retreading existing properties is just never my favorite thing, but I can't fault them for it. And, parents need something to show their kids so that they shut up once in a while.
I mean, from a business standpoint, I agree with you. It's a brilliant decision. But I mean, just from a creative standpoint, it's like the laziest thing they can do. I mean, they're just literally taking copies of old scripts and just making them again.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
With a company that has a stable of incredibly creative people.
Yeah. I mean,
certainly do something original.
I guess it would be one thing if there was some part of Disney that was making anything original, but they're really not. I mean, they're just, even their popular Star Wars movies are boiled down to being rehashes of the previous Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
It's all, I guess the Marvel stuff is kind of fresh, but again, they're just making live action film versions of comic book storylines.
Right.
Like they're not even writing original storylines for those movies.
If I was Disney, and I'm clearly not, but I feel like they're so massive and monolithic that they should just carve out a little, Dimension Films sub studio that's only original content, like completely original content, not based on any previous properties. And just, you don't have to go crazy with it. I'm not asking for the world, but just put 2 movies a year on the slate or something to start with. You've got all these tremendously creative people. Who doesn't want to work with Disney right now? Yep. And just develop something from the ground up that has nothing pre-existing and see what happens. I mean, why wouldn't you do that if you got all those unlimited resources? I mean, if you can take, I feel like Disney's idea is to take 100% of their resources and put it into developing more properties that will continue to have the money coming in 100% all the time, while not devoting any of their resources to building something brand new and fresh. And just as someone who enjoys filmmaking and, creative original properties, I would love to see them just throw money at something that was just brand new and fresh like that. And they're not, and I can't really blame them because it's working for them, but I'd like to see it.
Yeah, I would too.
All right, so you want to tell us a little bit about this story about the British Film Institute that I saw?
Yeah, so this is an interesting little side note. The British Film Institute, BFI, has decided that they will no longer support any film where the villain has any sort of facial scar.
Strange.
Right? Yeah. So, when you think about it, you're talking about characters like Heath Ledger's Joker, or we were just talking about The Lion King. Who's the villain in The Lion King? Scar. And he's called that because he has a big facial scar. And the whole idea, which I kind of get, is that, Hollywood uses facial scars as shorthand for this person is evil.
Right.
And they want to try to put an end to that sort of stereotyping. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I would like to see maybe this catch on and expand out. Like there's never once been an albino in a film or television series who wasn't a bad guy. Let's be honest, little people are frequently cast as, comic relief or, the stereotypes are out there. I don't need to run through them.
Sure.
I just, this is, on the one hand, I get it's, social justice warrior stuff, but on the other hand, is it wrong? I mean,
I don't think it's wrong, but it seems like they are...
You seem incredulous.
Well, no, I'm not incredulous. I just feel like there are probably some other worse stereotyping things going on that they would have gotten to before that. But you also run into, I guess, the truth of the art, if that makes sense. Like, for instance, there's all these Middle Eastern actors who all they ever get roles for is terrorists. But if you're going to tell those kind of stories, then what else are you supposed to do? So, I feel like there's probably other things they could address ahead of that, but I have no problem with them doing that. Especially, I think, since you talk about all this is kind of going over the deep end maybe a little bit, but like all the genocide and all the stuff that's happened in like Africa and all these other countries where their signature of them going through the towns will literally be to scar up people and their faces, so I can see where maybe this was birthed.
Well, but I mean, the people doing the scarring aren't scarred.
Yeah.
Yeah. The point is,
I'm talking about their sort of needlessly casting aspersions on the people who are left scarred. I'm saying I understand why this would be something that they would try to do. Well,
yeah, and I mean, just people, children who are born with a cleft lip, or who get a scar at some point, whenever they're represented in films, they're always the villain.
Yeah.
And, and that's a creative decision by Hollywood, right? There's not a lot of scarred actors who they're just casting in the roles of a villain. Like a Middle Eastern actor, you cast them in the role of the villain because they're Middle Eastern and you've written a Middle Eastern villain. When you're going to have a scarred villain, like you're taking an actor who isn't scarred and you're adding some sort of prosthetic onto that. And I think their point is that, Hollywood is literally taking this additional step to marginalize this segment of the population.
I mean, sort of, but not entirely related. I get to mention it again. Hereditary. There was a tiny little bit of backlash over how they whether or not they altered the child's face a little bit for the show to make her.
I remember wondering that.
Yeah, and I know that at the time I gently looked into it, but I don't recall now like what level they went to change the way she looked. But I think if anything, it was very, very subtle. So there's a little bit of backlash about that too. So this isn't completely out of the blue.
It is curious that it's the British Film Institute doing it, because when you think back on the history of James Bond movies, like what percentage of the villains have had scars?
No kidding.
Right? If they can't do that anymore, that like wipes out half the Bond villains.
Yeah, one of them had like a face full of diamonds or something.
That's right.
All right, you want to tell us a little bit about this story with James Russo and Chris Evans?
Oh, yeah. So if you remember a few months ago when principal filming for the last Avengers film ended, Chris Evans tweeted out a really nice tweet that basically sounded like a goodbye. It was him, thanking everyone for the years he had playing the character, and he appreciated all the help and, the cast and crew and creators, and told everyone that, it was just an emotional goodbye. And everyone knew that we were coming to the end of his contract. So it seemed like that was probably the end of him playing Captain America. That's how everyone's taken it and moved on since then. Well, recently, James Russo of the Russo brothers, who directed the Avengers Infinity War and several other Marvel movies, made a comment. He said, I think it was more emotional for him than us, speaking of Chris Evans, only because he's not done yet. I won't explain what that means, but the audience will soon understand what I'm talking about. So that's led the internet to believe, Chris Evans isn't done with Captain America, that he's going to come back and reprise that role.
Yeah, I guess that wouldn't be a real surprise necessarily, but I would have no idea what that was. I'm sure the folks that are super familiar with the comics might have an idea of what that might be, but I don't have a clue.
Well,
I mean, he's so iconic, and I think we talked recently about how it's hard to see it when it's happening, but 10, 20 years from now, Chris Evans as Captain America will be an iconic movie character, much like all the ones from 15, 20 years ago now that we consider iconic. So I'm not surprised at all if they want to keep him around, but I assume whatever it is that he's going to continue to show up in will be things that require, not so much commitment from him. He won't be gone for, 6 months out of the year, probably just, I don't want to say cameo, but
yeah,
I can't imagine he's gonna accept having a whole new gigantic workload dumped on him once he finally got out of it, because I know he wants to focus on family, he wants to direct and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the internet is misreading the statement. I think that Russo is probably not referring to him reprising the role of Captain America. I think he might actually be referencing Chris Evans directing a Marvel film, because we know Evans has expressed interest in directing, and Disney will give him anything he wants at this point. So.
Yeah, and that would be interesting for him out of the gate to direct something huge for Marvel. I mean, he must have quite a creative vision there. I'm sure he's already had discussions in the background about it. So who knows? Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see exactly what that cryptic comment means, and what audiences are going to find out about soon. Another interesting little piece of news, at least I find it pretty interesting. We've spoken about Bohemian Rhapsody several times on the show already, and just recently crossed the $500 million mark for worldwide box office, which is far more than I think anyone predicted that movie ever coming close to.
Sure.
A huge hit for Fox at this point. And guess what? It's not even done yet. So that is worldwide box office that does not include box office in Italy. It hasn't opened there yet. It's about to open there, I think, this week. And Fox has now announced that they're going to add new screenings of the film all over the world that will be sing-along versions, where the audience will be encouraged to interact with the film, kind of like what we discussed possibly happening with the film.
Yep.
Anyway, at this point, with all of that still yet to come, analysts are saying it's probably a pretty safe bet that the movie will end up crossing the $600 million mark by the end of it all, which is a staggering success for a movie that, if you remember, only had a budget of about $50 million.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah, this could easily turn out to be Bryan Singer's most successful movie, and he got fired from it.
He got fired, yes. That's crazy. And yeah, I'm still very curious to see what, if any, effect this has on future music biopics, because, like we said, the Elton John one's coming up, Rocket Man. And if we're just going to start seeing a slew of these coming down the pike, but I don't know. I mean, maybe not, because we in the recent past, I guess not the same thing, but you had the Mamma Mia series of movie, or the movie that was a big hit, and that's because of the soundtrack essentially.
Sure. And I mean, Hollywood keeps trying to revive the musical, and it just never seems to go anywhere.
Yeah. So I wonder if this will just kick it up another notch and make them realize that there's just a ton of money to be made there. But man, glad to see the movie doing so well. I think, you and I are strangely in the minority of people that liked it even on a critical level.
Yeah.
While acknowledging the warts.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting that, this film has been much maligned by critics, especially online critics.
Yeah, and yet, other podcasters I've seen a lot.
For sure. But I mean, audiences don't seem to feel the same way about it at all.
It's definitely a crowd pleaser. So I want to throw one more little piece of news at you and see what you think about this. I'm sure you've seen that there's a re-release of Deadpool that's going to be coming out soon.
Yes, the PG-13 release,
cut.
Yes.
What do you think of that tactic?
I think it makes a lot of sense. So the Deadpool 2 made slightly less than the first Deadpool movie, and I think that's entirely because they released it the wrong time of year. If they released it at the same time they had the first one, I think it would have easily exceeded the first one. And I think the studio kind of realizes that mistake too. This gives them a second bite at the apple, right? They've taken R-rated superhero movie, they cut it down to a PG-13 rate for that same superhero film. Now you've opened it up to a much broader audience, and you get a re-release out of it, so you get to add box office to the original box office take.
Yeah.
That's good for marketing to say this movie ended up surpassing the first movie. I mean, I think it's a wise decision, and I think if it goes well, which it probably will, I think it probably guarantees a Deadpool 3.
And I'm really curious how, I mean, I may be the only person who's curious about this, but I'm really curious how on the business end this works. Is this technically a different movie? I mean, they're not going to, I wouldn't think they would just be able to add the box office numbers to the first Deadpool sequel from this one if it's a recut and a different rating. I just don't know if that's going to be one of those things where their box office total, I mean, obviously when you speak of it in Hollywood and you're talking about numbers, you're going to combine it, but technically in the sort of the background business of Hollywood, is it going to be considered two separate movies? I'm just curious how that works.
I don't think there is a background to that. Like, I don't think there's an arbiter that actually keeps track of that. I think box office take is 100% marketing, and so I'm sure they'll lump them together and make a big selling point out of that.
It's a pretty interesting tactic. I'll be very curious to see how it turns out. But last question, do you want to see it?
I would have to wait until I knew how different it was.
Right.
So I know they've shot some additional footage to it, and I know
that's another thing that makes me wonder about how they divvy up the two pictures.
Well, so here's the thing: like, the additional footage that we know they've shot is a play on the bookends from A Princess Bride. So presumably it's just bookends to the original film, and then the actual film is just a cut down of the R-rated version.
So you are certain that that's actually in the movie, and it's not just for the trailer to advertise it.
I am not certain of that.
Okay, because I saw that in the trailer and I thought, oh, that's actually pretty clever. I'm a huge fan of The Princess Bride. That makes me kind of want to see it. And then after I watched the trailer, I thought to myself, wait a minute, that probably is just a marketing trick for the trailer. So I'm not sure.
So the reason I believe that is in the actual movie is because the official movie poster release of it includes images of that.
I gotcha.
So that makes me think that, it is for real. And
that's an interesting sound.
Yeah.
Your brain is losing something, isn't it?
There was another point I was going to make, and then you asked me about...
I interrupted you.
That, and I lost the additional point that I was going to make.
Maybe it'll come up during development news.
God, you've robbed the audience of something truly great. I guarantee you it was just going to be mind-blowing.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure you'll remember during development news, which comes up next. So the team that brought us BBC's Sherlock series with Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman, the guys who created the show, Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss, are working on a Dracula series now. It was recently announced that Claes Bang, who I have no idea who that is.
Awesome name, though.
I'm probably not even pronouncing the name right.
God, I hope you are, though.
That he was in The Girl in the Spider's Web and a movie called The Square. He will play Dracula. And I guess for me, this is really only worth mentioning because I think Sherlock was super strong, at least for the first couple of seasons.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
And then, it's sort of disappeared. And I don't think it's actually done yet. It's just one of those things where the stars are so busy that they only get around to making a season once every 4 or 5 years or so.
Yeah. Not only the stars, but the creative force behind it, those two guys, they're super busy in England working in television.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I'll be all for giving this a shot if and when it actually gets produced. I'm a little surprised that I had no idea who this star is going to be that's playing Dracula. But of course, I'm assuming that Dracula is the star. I mean, the show is about him, but maybe it's a human character that revolves around him. I don't know.
But did you know who Benedict Cumberbatch was before Sherlock?
I feel like we did, but maybe not like on a grand scale. Like wasn't his
think
first
I did.
breakout role, really?
I'm pretty sure that was the first place I ever saw.
Okay, well, in that case, I put my trust in the guys who created the show. Moving on to a couple of other items here. I teased at the beginning we were going to talk about some animated movies being turned into live action and vice versa. So, Terrence, why don't you tell us a little bit about this YouTube series that's coming out that's supposed to be animating over the original Star Wars trilogy dialogue?
Well, you pretty much summed it up.
I pretty much
there.
did, and I realized that as I was saying it.
Yeah, so Disney is releasing a series of shorts onto YouTube, and it basically takes the original dialogue recorded for the first 6 Star Wars films and the original sound effects for those films and animates little sort of Japanese anime style shorts of key pivotal scenes. And I mean, watching the trailer for them, and they're available. You can go watch, I think, like the first 6 of them now on YouTube. The animation quality is pretty impressive. It's a bit jarring at first to hear the voices of these actors, being these animated characters, because you're used to when actors voice for animation, they're far more enthusiastic and it's a much different style. And here everyone sounds like real laid back and kind of, and it's a bit of a jarring clash with the like hyper sensationalized anime style that they're going with, but it's high quality, and that's the important thing. Once again, Disney is not taking any shortcuts at all. I mean, they could have thrown together some lame Flash animation and done this exact same thing. And the market, the demographic for this, kids would probably have enjoyed it the same amount, but they didn't. They spent some money and got a real company to do this. And I mean, I say Disney got a real animation company to do that, but that's exactly what they did. Disney didn't animate this. And I mean, it looks good. I think it's kind of a clever take. The point that I even think this is worth bringing up for is why YouTube, right? We know Disney is launching their streaming service. We know Disney has a huge digital footprint with all their websites and all their existing networks. Why do you think they went with YouTube for this?
A fine question. Maybe it's sort of as a tester to see what the interest is and to see if there's interest in maybe continuing to try what they're doing with Star Wars with other movies. And on top of that, just to see if the property itself might, send them into doing maybe a full version of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can only assume it's because they just feel like, well, let's just see how the public reacts to this before we go too far with it.
YouTube is on the rise. There's no question there. The viewership is incredible. There's an entire generation of people who do not watch regular television in any way. They only watch YouTube. There are celebrities on YouTube who are making far more money than even big name A-list stars. And I think this might be Disney's first foray into trying to figure out how they can cash in on that.
YouTube's only been around since 2006, which blows my mind.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it is definitely affecting the industry in huge ways. I mean, there's no predicting where it's going to be a few years from now, but for everyone out there who wants a creative outlet and, has any ambition at all, make something for YouTube. Now is the time. It's the Wild West there, and fortunes and careers are being made right now.
You can listen to Technicolor Blood on YouTube.
And you should.
And
you should do that.
Right now, you don't see anything, really. You just hear things like these things we're spouting at you now, but it is there. One other point on the Star Wars topic we're talking about. So, yeah, it looks good. But on the other side of it, again, we continually are railing against remakes and existing properties and all that. I guess I'm at peace with this because I feel like kids, like children now, if you show them the actual live action Star Wars movies, they're all going to like the second trilogy a lot better than the original trilogy just because of the eye candy.
Yeah. Faster pace too.
Yeah. So if this is a way for them to see and consume and appreciate the original series, then I guess I'm okay with it because I feel like most kids probably watch A New Hope and are bored by it, you know, because it has a good screenplay and some good cinematography.
Right.
And it's not just, having your head in a tiny, bright animated box thrown up against the wall for 2 hours.
That's a great way of describing the prequels.
Yeah, which is, what kids want to see. So I hope that it helps ingratiate a new class of kids into the original series. And then once they get older, maybe if their parents are, if they care, enough about it, they can say, okay, now it's time. We can show you, we won't have them be disappointed by their first viewing. They'll get the cartoon version when they're little kids, and then we get a little bit older and they can understand something like story. Then they can actually show them the movie. So I'm at peace with this decision by Disney.
By comparison to the hyperactive style of animation that they're using for these shorts, the original trilogy is even more dull, slow, and plodding.
Yes. All right, I got a few other notes here in development, but I'm just we'll just kind of run through them real quick. Won't spend a lot of time on them. Adult Swim / Cartoon Network is producing a Blade Runner animated series, but it's going to be based on the Blade Runner 2049 movie. Ugh. It is from the makers of Cowboy Bebop and Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. I have not seen Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. I know we had both seen Cowboy Bebop way back in the day. So that's an interesting choice. I mean, I'm a bitch for all things Blade Runner, so I might check it out. I'm not super into animated series much anymore as I was when I was a little bit younger. But I would check out the first one just to see if it catches my eye. Yeah,
I was a big fan of Cowboy Bebop, and I have seen Standalone Complex. It's not great, but the quality of it is, it's top tier. So it's encouraging to hear that they're getting some of the best to do it. But I don't need or care about this.
Gotcha. Speaking of Cowboy Bebop, Netflix is actually going to be developing a live action Cowboy Bebop series. Now, this one really raised my eyebrow. I'm not sure how they'll pull that off or what it's going to look like. When I hear now, I really liked Cowboy Bebop, but when I saw this news, the first thing that came into my brain was the trauma I experienced a couple of weeks ago when I had to watch Speed Racer. The colors and the noise, like the visual noise and the actual noise. I don't know how this is going to translate to live action. Again, I will give it a shot.
Yeah,
but I'm not exactly. I'm not hopeful.
Yeah, there's stuff that works in anime, like the weirdness, the wackiness of it all, that it's real hard to convert that into a live action format. It's real popular in Japan right now. They're doing that with all their most famous anime properties, and very few of them actually get a release here in the US, but you can find them online if you're a big fan and you want to hunt them down. And none of them translate very well at all. So I don't know. We'll see.
All right, we're going to come back real briefly and talk about Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott just turned 81, and he is one of our favorite living directors.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to say that at different points of his career, he was. I'm guessing probably your favorite living director.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, and if not for me, number one, then certainly in the top 2 or 3, but definitely for a stretch, a favorite. So he just turned 81, and I thought what might be a fun thing to talk about real quick, instead of just a generic, what's your favorite Ridley Scott movie or whatever. What is your singular favorite moment in a Ridley Scott movie?
Man, that is such a hard question because he's had such a long career. There's so many films. They're so visually dynamic. There's so many great little moments and scenes. I don't think I could narrow it down to one, so I'm going to give you 2.
I hope one of them's not mine.
Okay. Well, one of them is from Gladiator, and one of them is from Blade Runner. Okay. So the first one is from Gladiator, and that is, the movie opens with a huge epic battle full of great visuals. But in the course of the battle, you think that the lead character, Russell Crowe, is killed. And then later he sort of awakens from where he's been wounded terribly, but his wounds have been patched. And there's this moment between when he dies and when he comes fully back to life, where he sort of drifts in and out of consciousness. And it shows Ridley Scott edits together these visuals, which show 2 things. 1, the passage of time as he's healing, and then 2, him drifting in and out of consciousness and sort of going on a journey that is a mixture of memories from his life with more symbolic images from his life. And it's a really, really gorgeous moment in the film. If people don't remember exactly what I'm talking about, if there's one visual from that stands out, it's the scene where you just see Russell Crowe's hand as he's walking through a field of wheat and he's just brushing along the top of all those strands of wheat. I really, really love that sequence.
And that shot of the wheat has kind of quietly become one of those super like repeated and copied shots in movies. I've seen that tons of times since that. Sort of, we talked a while back about the Right Stuff shot where the guy's around the corner walking together. That's another one of those shots that sort of under the radar has been recreated several times.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And I also love the shot of Russell. I guess they have him on some sort of apparatus where they're driving him over the field, so he looks like he's floating above the ground as he's moving across the field with the ground under him moving.
The first time I'd ever seen that shot used in a film, and I mean, it's just so evocative.
Yeah. All right. So what's your other one?
Well, now I wish I'd saved the Gladiator one for first, because now that we've spoken about it, it's clearly the one I prefer. But the other one I would want to mention is in Blade Runner. Harrison Ford plays just, we believe, a everyman, just a regular guy who gets in a lot of fist fights. And at one point he gets the snot beat out of him, right? But he's Harrison Ford. He's the hero of a film. Typically, Harrison Ford gets beat up in every film he does. You don't think twice about it. In Blade Runner, Ridley actually takes the time to watch you or show you Harrison Ford go back to his apartment and wash the blood out of his mouth. He washes the blood out of his mouth. He literally sticks his finger in his mouth and counts his teeth to see if he's lost any in the fight. It's a little sequence. There's no dialogue. And after he does this little absolution in the bathroom, he then pours himself a drink and sits down on the couch. But I love that sequence. Like, you don't see that in movies ever. Like, you can go back and watch actual noir detective movies that Blade Runner is sort of a riff on, and like, you don't see that happen. I just love that sequence so much. It's maybe my favorite moment from that film, and that's a film that's loaded with gorgeous visuals and crazy character moments and stuff, but it's just so simple.
Sure, that's a great one. My moment is also from Blade Runner. I can't speak highly enough about that movie. I feel like I have some other friends who are into movies that I've tried to get them into Blade Runner, and they're like, yeah, that was fine. You watch it and you see it's so unusual because it's a love note to film noir, but it also has become this movie that has inspired the visual look of so many other movies.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just, if you watch it in the proper context, I feel like if Blade Runner were the same movie it was, but just set as a drama in the present day, I feel like it would be more revered, like, sort of like a super amped up version of, LA Confidential or something.
Right.
Because it took place in the future, it doesn't quite get the sort of acclaim that I feel like it deserves. It gets that sort of acclaim from folks who are like big sci-fi fans, but just visually, the screenplay, the characters, I love that movie to the end. I'll always love that movie. But my moment from it is at the end, when Roy Batty is about to run out of life, and they have that awesome scene where on the top of the building, it's raining, and Deckard is beat. He's hanging on the edge of the building. He's finished, and Roy Batty makes the decision to save his life, and he gives that awesome speech that allegedly Rutger Hauer improvised a good portion of,
right? And
he saves Deckard's life. And the whole reason that that Roy Batty's character was going through all this is because he wanted more life. In the end, he appreciated life enough, even though he's not an actual human being.
Right. He
appreciated it enough to save this person that he was trying to kill. And I just love the character play there, and I love how unusual it is to have. I mean, what villains do that? In the movie. I love the depth of the Roy Batty villain. He's one of my all-time favorite, maybe my all-time favorite movie villains, because of his depth and his humanity. I mean, when you're trying to learn and get into screenwriting, all that sort of thing, you learn about character arc and all that sort of thing. And I mean, that character to me has one of the best arcs ever, especially for a villain, because usually all that stuff is thrown on the hero.
Sure. But
Roy Batty as a villain, and that speech, and the visual look of the rain, and the fact that he saves them, and the fact that villain, the bad guy could have certainly won, but in the end saves Deckard. That's my one moment from a Ridley film.
That shot that you're describing, where Rutger delivers those dialogues, I mean, it's so gorgeous. He's lit by the neon signs. The rain is coming down, so the water is just running down his face, and the whole time he's holding a dove in his hands.
Right.
It's just, I mean, it's one of those crazy visuals that smashes up the best of Western filmmaking, but also, you know, with The Dove and The Rain, like the best of Eastern filmmaking, like Hong Kong filmmaking and stuff.
Yep.
And, you know, at the time in 1982 or 84, 82, that, you know, audiences weren't as familiar with Asian filmmaking. Like it hadn't made that transition yet. So that just blew people's minds, you know, but Ridley like loved Asian filmmaking. You know, you watch his movie Black Rain, and that is a tribute to his love affair with Asian filmmaking.
Yeah. Big time underrated pull from his filmography there, Black Rain.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks Ridley for that, and happy birthday. I know you're listening. I know you got time for this. All right, guys. Well, we really appreciate you guys listening. Look for another episode really soon, and we'll do it again.
Hey, guys, if you get a chance, go see a movie this weekend.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we'll see you on the next one.
Okay, I remember. I remember what I was going to say about Deadpool before you interrupted me.
Yes. Well,
And
now you've turned the tables.
Believe me, it was worth the wait.
I'm sure it was.
The other thing I was going to say is, in addition to the two bookends that they're adding to the beginning and the end, the crew and Ryan Reynolds are pretty famous for doing tons and tons of alternative punchlines to the jokes in the Deadpool movies. So it would be kind of intriguing if there's, you know, several of the same jokes, but the actual punchline in this version is a different punchline. In some cases, we know that'll be a fact because the punchline was an R-rated punchline, and now it'll be a PG-13 one. But I mean...